welcome to this edition of FDSOA Street Talk. My name's Lance Vincent. I am the FDSOA chairman, and I'm joined today by some experts in the field, and we're going to have a discussion about risk and benefit and incident safety officers and how they fit into the emergency scene. The folks I have with me today are Eastern Director Ben Holly, FDSOA CEO Eric Valliere, and our special guest today, who's a member of our team, but we decided to bring him on because he's got some super valuable insight to give because of his experience. FDSOA subject matter expert Mike Richardson. How's everybody doing today?
Yay, yay, doing good.
Yeah, great, great.
So let's just start off. I think, man, that was a very dynamic introduction for Mikey. Let's get him to talk about some of his experiences in the fire service and what he does with us. I think that most people have seen us on this podcast before if they follow along a little bit. We're not able to get on this as much as we would love to. I'd love to kick out this podcast every week or two a week, but it takes a minute to get that done. But Mike, why don't you introduce yourself to the folks that don't know you and kind of give us a rundown of who you are and kind of your experience in the fire service and what you do now?
Sure, appreciate it. Mike Richardson did 8 years in the Army, followed by 28 years in the fire service. That was split out between the states of New York, Florida, and Kentucky. Served all the ranks all the way up to the Division Chief of Training and Safety with St. Matthew's Fire, which is part of Louisville Metro in Kentucky. I retired from that position a little over 3 years ago. When I retired, I went to work for NIOSH as a line of duty death investigator. Was an active investigator for 3 years. Due to many reasons, that program was basically shut down at one point with some administrative changes and issues. The status of that program is still kind of up in the air. So I left that program. I'm now trying to spend as much time as I can with FDSOA. I've been a member of FDSOA going back into the early 2000s. Served as an incident safety officer, a health and safety officer with FDSOA. I'm kind of currently filling the role as the professional development advisor. Served on the board of ISFSI for a number of years, chaired their professional development committee. So have hopefully a pretty well diverse background in both professional development and occupational safety and health. So
You've done some stuff.
Yeah, you've done some stuff. So certainly thanks for being on here today. We didn't have to twist your arm too much because we just said, "Hey, Mikey, you want to be on our podcast?" And you said, "Yeah, I'm a member of the team." I do know that you and I and Eric specifically worked together on the board years ago. And we were super excited to get you back on in a capacity that you could the level of experience and the depth of knowledge that you bring from the fire service back to the safety side is exponential. Eric, why don't you tell us what kind of your ideas as far as bringing Mike back on board as our curriculum development coordinator or professional development coordinator, kind of from your eyes, what that did from the CEO's point
Yeah,
of view?
so thanks, Vinny. Mike, I got to tell you, dude, you mentioned quite a few things of experience, but there's so many layers in between each one of those roles you've had. You're a master instructor. You bring to the table things others don't, man. And I think what we have is synergy in our organization, and our board has it, is the energy and the passion we have for what we're trying to do, right? And you have that. You bring to the table not only numbers on what really it means on incidents and types and numbers of line of duty deaths and the big five and all the things that you learn from NIOSH and years of experience. You bring an experience level that not only talks about theory but talks about practicality, and your attention to detail with our curriculum, is just expanding our base on deliverables. And so we're you brought to the table the 5 reads. That was your mastermind as far as a CE for refreshing the safety officers so they don't have to go through the 16-hour again. And you brought together some other deliverables that we brought at the conference, the risk versus benefit. Now you're getting into the situational awareness realm with what that looks like, how that can add to really our knowledge base of our membership and improving the livelihood of the service out there, not only just nationally and internationally. And I'm looking at my partner Trevor from Canada, but we're delivering material all over the world through DoD bases, and so we're touching our drive is to touch as much of the fire service as we can to save as many firefighters as we can, which ultimately will save victims on the fires. And so what you bring to the table, Mikey, is you can't put a number on it, man, and I can't thank you enough for being a part of the team.
I certainly second that, man. Another thing that Mike brings, and we'll kind of get into this and further into the podcast we get, but Trevor, I kind of want your take on something that we've been talking about a lot. Um, you know, Safety officers today are kind of seen as the folks who are risk adverse, right? But at FDSOA, we've taken a different stand to that aversion to risk is not what we do. We really take a look at being and trying to develop really good risk managers, and that risk versus benefit piece that we're trying to develop. So walk me through what your ideas are on risk versus benefit on the fire ground, and how the ISO and specifically how FDSOA trains ISOs to be risk managers and look at that benefit piece.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you know what? I think that risk benefit analysis is one of the biggest things that an ISO can. It's the ground roots of everything that they do. And if there's not a benefit to what you're doing, then and if it's too risky, then we need to back off. That doesn't mean that we can't be aggressive fire departments. We need to be aggressive. Um, I come from a large urban fire service where we were super aggressive, but we were safe at the same time. And safety and aggression are not exclusive to each other. They can go hand in hand. And that ISO is not there to stop people from uh, putting out the fire, rescuing people, whatever the case might be. They are there not to be a bunker gear cop, whatever analogy you want to use. They're there to help you do it safely, expediently, be aggressive, put the fire out. Like, let's be honest. If you can put the fire out, good things happen, right? That's when
Yeah.
it becomes even safer. So I would say that ISO is, if they can look at it with a critical lens, look at it, what are we willing to risk to get this benefit? And if they're willing to go through that, work with command, they're working with command all the time, but work that way and look at it through that lens, everything that's being done on the fire ground. And if there's something that needs to be tweaked, not necessarily stopped, but they can obviously stop that. But I think maybe just go at it from a different angle. Maybe there's something that they're going into a fire. I say it all the time. You go to a fire, 90% of the time you're going through the front door, right? What if you go through the front door and there's no floor there, right? Or it's more advantageous if it's a walkout basement. You're more advantageous to go around the backside, and we have basements in Canada. If you don't have basements somewhere where you are, but you go around the backside and can attack it that way. It's safer to do it, and you're still achieving the same goals.
So agreed 100% that relationship that an ISO has, specifically with an incident commander, and the way that they manage risk is ultimately decided by your organization's fire chief and what level of risk that individual decides that we're going to take. I'm gonna, and it feels like I'm doing a round robin here, but it kind of goes right in hand. I'm gonna introduce again Ben Holly, who's the Eastern Director. He's out of Cobb County, Georgia. Comes out of recently promoted into their health and safety officer position from a training captain position. Ben, give us a little bit a piece of actually from that ground level building a program that incorporates the health and safety officer. I'm sure you deal with your incident safety officers and kind of how Cobb specifically looks at risk and benefit and some of the things that Cobb's done in the American Fire Service for sure has a large footprint. So walk us through some of that.
Yeah, sure. So, hey, everybody, good to see y'all again.
Oh, hey,
Always,
Ben.
yeah, always enjoy getting together and hang out with my buddies, even if it's virtually. But yeah, so 20, just a little over 25 years in the fire service, all 25 with Cobb County. Just recently promoted back in December of last year to really the first ever standalone HSO. We always had somebody that was responsible for the roles of the HSO, but that responsibility was shared among a lot of people. That it was none of their primary duty and responsibility. And so the fire chief, our new fire chief, of course, now I guess he's been in the position about 18 months. Made it a priority for our organization. He said, "Hey, we're large enough. We should have done this a long time ago," and he made it a priority.
Yeah,
And so, so my role, it's kind of fitting because it really goes along with everything that really the FDSOA stands for. If anybody's ever attended one of our conferences, you know that you can get everything from a class on a breakout session on the best way to design and build a fire station so that you're reducing exposure to your people, to apparatus classes for the mechanics, the EVTs, into incident safety officers certifications, HSO certifications, cancer prevention, mental health, physical well-being. It's all of those things, right? And so in this new position that I find myself in, those are ultimately all the things that I'm working on, right? And so, oddly enough, next week we have we're kicking off a 2-day ISO program with FDSOA curriculum, bringing 20 new safety officers online, which is going to be fantastic. We've actually worked. Yeah, I worked with my fellow captain in the training division when I was a captain in the training division. Worked with him to get the Pro Board certification ISO course as a requirement for our captain's positions. And so now it is a promotional requirement for any lieutenant who may be moving into the captain's role.
So let me pause you right there. And I know we talked a lot before we started this thing about not talking over one another. So I'm going to pause you right there.
No, it's okay.
So the system I'm in Texas operates purely civil service. You take a test. There's no we have requirements that you have to follow to get there. But once you're qualified, you can take an exam to promote. But those organizations that do what they call and help me out with what they call it the
Career development, professional development path.
No, Ben, what do you call it when you go to get promoted? What do you call it? Going through the
assessment center?
Assessment center.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
That you go through the assessment center. Mike, I'm going to ask you a question and then we'll go back to Ben. How important is it that as you're going to become a company officer that you've had experience or exposure or training on the safety officer side of things before you put that red hat on?
Ironically, a common factor, causal contributing factor that we saw in line of duty death investigations was acting officers. So that will tell you right there when you take someone who's not properly prepared and put them in a role, either as an acting company officer or chief officer, that can have significant consequences because they are literally making life or death decisions. And if they've not been prepared for that, we're ultimately, as an organization and as the fire service, setting them up for failure. And we saw that quite frequently. I also saw where someone was assigned or given the role of incident safety officer at an incident, but they were not able to operate effectively in that role because they had never been prepared for that. We all come up as strategy and tactics firefighters, company officers, chief officers, and that's what we're always going to default back to. And typically, if you take a company or chief officer and say, hey, you're ISO, and they're not prepared for that, what's going to happen? They're going to want to fall back into a strategy and tactics role. So
Okay. So
definitely saw the consequences of that firsthand, and it's very important and very critical. And I think the earlier and sooner you start that process, the better it ties in, because we can have a disconnect from the bottom to the top if we're not all on the same sheet of music when it comes to what is risk management. What does that look like? How do we do that? And we talk about an FDSOA embedded safety. So if we can start that process as soon as possible, we can build that throughout the organization.
Sure. So that's a great answer. And then those of you who are designing assessment centers can take a look at whether or not that's something that for your organization needs to be incorporated. Ben, of course, we run on timelines here. I'm going to give you a couple more minutes to talk about some of that stuff that you've been building, and then we'll go into the next subject matter. So,
Yeah,
um,
for
back
sure.
to
And
you, Ben. Let's talk about what you've done here.
yeah, so Mikey, I think that's everything you said, man. I couldn't agree more. And that's one of the things, we kind of do an entry level, um, we basically, to name it after something that most anybody who's a member of the organization might recognize is, we do a little bolstered version of the 5 reads for our acting officers in charge as they're getting ready to promote to driver. And so then we looked at that and we said, okay, that's good, but it's just not good enough when in my organization, captains ride ladder trucks, lieutenants ride engines. Captains are the only ones that can ride up to fill in for a BC. And so as we looked at how our organization was laid out and what our response model was, and said, we see the value in having those chief level officers and acting chief level officers, those captains that ride up on the battalion car, that
Sure.
they have the certification, and it's more than the piece of paper. It's
Sure.
it's it's the knowledge, it's the tools that we provide in these 2-day classes, for people to really be able to focus in on maybe a particular aspect of the fire department or
Sure.
of the job. Let me say the job that they may not have been focused on at a lower rank.
So,
So
Vinny, can I jump in on that, man? Can I
sure,
jump
man.
in
And
on that?
I was gonna answer. I was gonna direct my next question to you, but yeah, if you've got something on that, go ahead.
Okay, so we talk about what it looks like for education of a company officer, and when you start looking at what we teach incident safety officers, man, it's fundamental stuff. It's building construction, it's reading smoke, we talk about reading risk, hazardous. That's information every company officer should have, right? So, what I did in Scottsdale is every company officer, you get promoted, you go to ISO certification class, right? And then I took it one step farther. And when we do our pre-academy for engineer, we teach them how to read buildings and read smoke, because we need eyes and ears on the outside. We shouldn't be hiding this education for people, right? This is really great knowledge base. And most people don't even have additional building construction training outside the academy until later on in their testing for company officer. There's this gap in the fire service where we're not focusing on the right things to keep us safe. And all of it. Go ahead, man. You're gonna ask me a question.
No, man. So let me preface with some things that I know, and then I'm gonna kind of do a round robin here. Um, I think the fire service does a really great job at developing. So let's say you test somebody and you get this brand new person off the street and you send them to an academy. I think all of us, this is interesting. The group you're watching right here, every single member of this group has been involved in organizational training. I was a training captain and then a training chief in our organization for 4 years. I know Mike, when he did his introduction, said that he went through training. I know that Chief Valliere came out of Mesa into Scottsdale straight into training. I know that Chief Shea went from where he's at and spent a lot of time in
Division chief of
Mississauga
training.
in training. And then we talked about Ben coming out of training. So there's a large training cadre sitting here having a conversation with one another. There's also an elephant in the room that I kind of want to talk about, is that there's been a suggestion recently that the incident safety officer position on the fire ground is unnecessary. So my question from a bunch of training officers is that because we don't develop our incident commanders well? We do a really great job of developing firefighters and fire officers, but we don't really do a great job of developing incident commanders. What we do is we say, hey, you've worn a red hat a long time. Here's your white hat. You're probably great at being an incident commander. And could it be that incident commanders don't know where that individual's supposed to fit? Or could it be really that they don't have the knowledge that it takes to understand what that incident safety officer is actually trying to achieve? I kind of want to go around and get everybody's opinion on why that narrative has become first and even come up in the fire service. Is that a training issue? Is that something that training officers should address? Or is that a culture issue? Is that the social media firefighter mentality, or what is that? Eric, I'm going to go to you first, and I'm going to give everybody a chance to.
Okay, so I'm so glad you did that, because I was going to jump in front of Ben anyway.
I could see you were going to do it.
It's on brand. It's on brand.
So it's more than one thing, man. Has the organization established a culture that makes safety a priority, right? Have we educated our people? Have we educated them together? Do they have enough emotional intelligence to understand how communication and teamwork fits in the command structure? You look at any command structure, safety's a part of it, right? Some organizations choose to put a lot of weight on that position, and some choose to embed them somewhere else, or embed it somewhere else. It's a person. It's not necessarily a thing, right? It's a person that has a responsibility for that, right? But all of that thing, that safety thing, that part of it, it needs to be bled through the whole organization to buy into that.
I agree.
It's not just one thing, man. It's not just one thing.
See, I would add on to what
Ben, you had your hand in the air, man. You had your hand in the air.
I was waving it like I just don't care.
Okay, you go. Ben, go first.
And then then he said it's that thing, and I went, that thing, that thing. That's just music in the brain.
It's not a thing.
It's So here's my thing, right? THANG. What I truly believe is that what gets missed in the vast majority of those individuals that want to put down a safety officer role, put down safety, is it's all about perspective. When I was a young tailboard firefighter, the last thing I wanted to do was have somebody tell me I couldn't do something, especially on an incident scene, right? We all came up. We all have roughly the same amount of years of service, probably within 5 or 6 years, 7 years of one another. And I think we all have to hearken back to that, being that 2-year tailboard firefighter that was like, this is my job, and I get to do whatever I want to do, however I want to do it, because 25 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we didn't have the data that we have now. We weren't experiencing the rapid rate of change of our structures and how they burn, right, based upon the contents inside of them. And so I think there's a perspective issue. We all now, we are all chief level officers, or were chief level officers, 2 retirees in the room. That we have to look at our organizations as a whole, and we look at them and say, hey, one life lost is not okay. It's just not. Even though we may have all been that guy when we were 20 years old, it was like, I'm happy to give my life to do whatever,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah.
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 And so now we're in this position where our perspective has changed. We either experienced something, Vinny, and I'm not trying to tell your story, but I know you experienced something very, very traumatic close to you that caused it to, that changed your perspective of the fire services. And that's where you came up with your famous line, what are we doing?
What
Right?
are you doing? Yeah.
What are we doing?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I think we as the fire service have gotten smarter. We've learned to trust the data, and it's our responsibilities within our organizations now are not just doing the job. It's what do we do? What can we do for our people so that they don't have to? We have to help show them the bigger picture, right?
Agreed.
And it's that
Yeah.
whole risk benefit analysis.
Yeah.
It's
So
30,000, 60,000, 90,000 foot view.
yeah.
You know
So,
what?
so before we expand too much on that, I'm gonna go to Trevor here and let him talk about kind of his perspective on how we develop people from a training standpoint and whether or not training in the fire service does a really great job at developing an incident commander to work inside that structure where you're going to have to have somebody that's an additional set of eyes and ears. And then we're going to go over to Mike and let him talk about risk versus benefits specifically. So go ahead, Trevor.
Yeah. I don't think we do a good job in the fire service of developing officers. Yeah, there's training out there. We put them in the position. We hope they're paying attention in the back seat while they're not sitting in the front seat. That we hope that we don't. I don't come from a department. I don't know what is it now. 10 years, and what I've learned the most is the diversity of the fire service, and that everybody. And that doesn't mean skin color. That doesn't mean anything. It just means everybody does things a little different. And you know what you know about your service. And it's hard to think outside of that box. Right. And so where I come from, even though we tried to make it happen, we didn't have drivers, chauffeurs, operators, whatever you want to call them. You were a firefighter, you were a driver. So you went from sitting in the back seat to sitting in the front seat, right? And we tried to do some mentoring, acting positions where you'd be, hey, I'm gonna play act today. I'm gonna be up in front, right? Right? It's a different mindset, and people pay more attention. They're jack of all trades to try to be that, but it's surprisingly they don't think about that next step. While they're sitting in the back seat, you're chirping at that officer saying, hey, why don't they do this or why don't they do that? And then all of a sudden you get put in the front seat. I equate it, and this might only work for some of our audience, but if you're following somebody in a snowstorm and then you're like, all of a sudden, why is this guy not driving so fast? Why can't I could go faster? And then all of a sudden you go around them and you're like, whoa, you can see why that person wasn't going fast because it's bad. So this is why I'm looking at a company officer. When you get in that front seat, you got to be ready. And Mike talked about it. If you're not ready, if you haven't been listening, paying attention, I always look at an officer and think, I'm going to learn two things. One is, wow, that was a really good idea. I like that idea. And the next is, wow, I'm never going to do that. I'm
So
never going to put
that's
somebody in that spot.
yeah, that's a great point about the diversity of the fire service and how differently we operate. I actually commented on a Facebook post today, and it was put out by a guy named Justin McWilliams. I've never met Justin McWilliams. I would love Justin McWilliams to come on this podcast if he wanted to, but he
Okay.
runs the search culture website, and I think that he sparks a lot of debate. But one of the things he says is search shall not have a hose line, and I kind of got into this. It wasn't really a debate because the word shall kind of hit me. And,
Mm-hmm.
and and the comment I made was I've effected rescues that would not have been tactically possible without a hose line. Personally,
Me too.
I've taken people out of a building as a member of a search crew without a hose line. I think the word shall is probably poor in that. I do understand what he was trying to do. He's trying to spark some kind of debate. Well, one of the individuals that commented on that is a guy that I've been in the fire service with a long time. He's in a department. He's a company officer in a department south of here. Um, and one of the things that he noted was the difference in his career and mine, even from when we came from the volunteer service.
Yeah.
And they show up with like 6 or 8 people to a working structure fire, and that's never been what we do. We show up with 12 to 16. And so he said, Vinny, showing up with 8 dudes to do the kind of work that you're 16 are doing is a whole different ball game. And so that's when you really get into these risk versus benefit decisions and how that is all able to mesh across the diversity of the fire service. Like, what's the risk? What's the benefit? Mike, that's your wheelhouse. Walk us through some of that.
Sure. So I'll start off with and kind of feeding back on Ben's, let's talk brass tacks and hard facts to steal somebody else's tagline, right? As a line of duty death investigator, I never investigated a incident where at the time of the line of duty death, civilian life safety was still in the mix. So I hate to say it, but it's a hard reality that the fire service needs to become aware of. And I've been dealing with line of duty deaths my entire career. Either I had 6 friends, coworkers, acquaintances that were killed in the line of duty throughout my career. So I've been there, done that, and lived that firsthand. Researching that for 20 years, I'm only aware of 3 line of duty deaths where a rescue was actually a possibility or was being attempted when a line of duty death occurred. That's 3 line of duty deaths in 20 years. If anybody else has data on that, please share it. But the bottom line is we are taking risks for what ultimately comes down to be property in many cases, which is not savable. Or we're taking risks when we don't know what the benefit is because we're basically blindly running into buildings because that's what we do. So, we have to come to the realization that many line of duty deaths are predictable and preventable if we have the correct professional development. And that's education, training, experience, personal development. So we have got to do a much better job at preparing our people to understand, risks. The leading cause on the fireground outside of medical for line of duty deaths is building collapse. Eric hit home the point, how good are our personnel when it comes to their ability to read buildings and predict structural collapse? Based on the line of duty death data, that's not good. We're not doing well. That's a huge area. Once again, benefit. There's a huge debate right now in the fire service. Is it searchable space? Is it survivable space? What is it? I'm glad that the conversation's happening because at least we're discussing and talking about it. But once again, I investigated several line of duty deaths where someone said this is a defensive fire. We are not going to be able to bring about a positive outcome for this incident, but people chose to take actions anyway that resulted in their death or the death of someone that they were in charge of. So, these are things that are unfortunately are the hard truth and hard reality in the fire service. And, we've got to make sure that if all of us raised our hand. I did, and said, I will risk my life to save a life. And I did that personally on many occasions. But like I said, none of my friends that died doing this job died trying to save a civilian. So we've got to make sure that we can differentiate and understand that difference, because once again, we should be making sure that, yes, we are going to take risks when those risks are warranted.
So, so that brings me to a great point. Eric, you and I were at, you actually sent me the picture earlier today on my phone. You and I got invited to Firehouse Expo to teach a class. Got some great exposure there to some people, some great people from all around the country. And after we finished teaching that class, we ate some good Italian food. It was
Yes,
good.
we did.
That's the
Good
best
wine.
Italian food in the country, by the way. I'm gonna put a shameless plug in here. If anybody ever makes it to Columbus, Ohio, go to Tony's. It is the best Italian food in
The
the
best
country that I
Italian
have
food
tasted.
in the United States is in Columbus, Ohio.
It's amazing, dude. It's amazing. Anyway, okay,
Good job,
shameless
Tony's.
plug for Tony's in Columbus,
Good job.
Ohio. And I hope this reaches back to him. I hope he's able to get it because it's amazing, because
He'll remember us.
it is. Oh, I'm sure he will. But you and I got a chance to sit into Dr. David Griffin from Charleston. We got to sit into his presentation that day, and he said something to me, and I want you to expand a little bit on specifically FDSOA's risk operate what we call our operational risk plan, right? But David Griffin said something in the presentation that you and I sat in, and I haven't talked to Dr. Griffin in a long time. And so I don't know if he would remember he said this, and if this gets back to him, I assure you he said this. He said, "None of my friends," speaking about the Charleston Nine, would have chosen to die for a couch. That's a quote. He said none of them would have chosen to die for a couch. And so that speaks to their operational risk plan. So let's talk about what FDSOA says our operational risk, a model of an operational risk plan should be, and then kind of expand. Everybody's welcome to throw in on that. But Eric, I want you to talk about what FDSOA says our operational risk plan should be.
So, man, you hit it right on the head, dude. And I'm getting goosebumps because that presentation that Dr. Griffin does, it talks about Charleston, it talks about culture, it talks about mindsets of the firefighters going into these calls. It really hits home to a lot of different things, and that incident's going to echo into eternity, man, because it has so many lessons to be learned. But we sat down. I know all of us sat down when we were hearing this risk versus benefit, not aggressive, too aggressive. We said we've got to make a stand, right? We got to make a stand on what we stand for. Because we all love aggressive firefighting. We all do. And Trevor, you hit on the head, man. Take fire away from you, you take away a lot of the problems. Risk is the death or injury to firefighters. We bring risk to the scene, right? When we take it on. So what we do is we will 100% risk our life to save a savable life, right? That means searching savable space, and evaluating the incident based on our knowledge, based on our education, right? And in a very structured and educated manner, right? We will risk our lives a little for property, right? We won't risk our lives at all for that which is lost. And in a lot of these incidents, there was no rebuilding that structure, man. It was the foundation was gonna put the fire out, right? The foundation was gonna put the fire out on a lot of these calls that Mike's investigated. So for us to really make a stand in the service and say, listen, this is what we stand for. We will risk our lives, right? But we want to make sure we're not only looking at savable victims, we're looking at savable firefighters. We don't want to put ourselves in harm's way when we don't need to, right? And I'm going to drive into the culture of where we're at, because we bring men and women into the fire service at a young age, right? There's a reason why we send 18 and 19-year-olds to war, because they're invincible, right? We were all invincible when we got in this job. every one of us like we were invincible, man. And Ben, you know that. Listen, man. When Two In Two Out came out, when the third engine company in Mesa had to be on deck, had to take rescue, what happened? As soon as you knew you were third, you slowed down and you want to take your football and go home. How immature that was me. Like, I'm being vulnerable. Like, every one of you guys were in a position like that at some point in your career. We have to be vulnerable and understand the culture of the service, because
sure.
we want to get in. We're fighter pilots, right? Fighter pilots train to fight. And when that bell rings, and it rings less and less these days because of the great prevention efforts that are happening, we want to get in the fire. And so we as mature individuals in the service, long in the tooth, however you want to say it, that have that understanding, that know where we came from, right? We've got to just pull back on the reins a little bit and educate. Incident commanders, right? They make 80% of their decisions in less than a minute. Fair?
Yeah,
Good
I agree with
decisions
that.
are made is based on good information. If we're not teaching our people and educating our people, when the IC's calling to a division or a sector or a group, if they're not getting good tactical information, they're not able to make good decisions, right? So what Dr. Griffin hit on in that organization's changed completely. And now I know he's retired, but he's still on the road. We probably should talk to him about coming back, because that resonates for people still.
I didn't realize he had retired.
Yeah. Yep.
Nice. Okay.
So I don't know if that answered your question, Benny.
No, dude, it's great, Trevor. I'm gonna go over to you and talk about in our operational risk versus benefit plan specifically. We mention two things, and we say educated and calculated. And I want you to explain how you become educated and calculated, because in my view, you can't become that and just hope when you show up on the scene you're all of a sudden educated and calculated. So walk me through that.
No, not at all. Some people ask me why I moved from a large fire service to a small fire service to be the deputy chief. And, I've been accused of, oh, you just wanted one extra stripe and that's why you went there. No, the reason I went there is because you can affect change faster. And why I say that is we have everybody on my fire service is now trained in the ISO doctrine, right? They are trained. If they don't have their Officer 1, they're not certified. But if they're in their lower than that, they're trained in the way that ISOs think, the way that we calculate risk. Everybody's looking at it from the same lens. Mike talked about it earlier. If you're in a smaller service, we need to all think the same and educate everybody the same, so that you can understand that when those things come up, you do it by muscle memory. You do it so that you're all thinking the same and that everybody is looking after the same interests. And that doesn't mean that we're not aggressive, but that means we're all looking out for each other all the time. I would go back to
That's your stand.
earlier in our conversation, we were talking about ISO as a person. NFPA says that you will have an ISO, right? And we have a culture in the North American Fire Service right now that says, screw NFPA. And I don't agree with that at all. I think what we need to do is not just have it as a person, but when Eric talked about it, when RIT first came out after the Brett Tarver incident and after all of that, I called it picnic RIT. We would go and we would set up on a front lawn and we would wait. And one crew would be sitting there the whole incident waiting to do stuff. Before we became proactive, where we're weakening the building and doing all those things, or before we became on deck, right? So our education has allowed us, and experience has allowed us, that doesn't active use of an ISO or a RIT team. But for an ISO, they need to be active. They need to be walking around that scene. They can't be just sitting beside the incident commander. They can't be just standing on the front lawn. They have to be active on the scene. They have to be walking around. They have to be looking at things. And if people have ISO training and they're inside the structure, or guess what? The ISO can maybe team up with if they need to take a quick look inside, they can team up with a hose line team, and go in quickly and come back out, take a look for themselves. Be active. Our friend Robbie Lagasse from Montreal Fire, large fire service in Canada, he was the ISO there for a long time, and he was very active. We talk about that all the time. And I think that training and that experience allows us to make everybody safe, but be aggressive at the same time.
But I think you got to do it the right way, Trev. You got to do it the
100% you
right
have to do it the right way.
And so, and I'm going to can this again, and I can this with Fire Rescue One because I want it to be canned for us, is we're not creating code enforcers, right? Nobody wants an ISO on the scene saying, hey, put your gloves on, buckle your belt, you can't do this, you can't. We want cultural reinforcers. We want them to know and understand the operational system. We want them to embed themselves in that operational system. We just want people to make sure they're doing things the right way and the way we all agree to, right? That's working as a team. They are part of the team to make sure that things are going the way they're supposed to be going and we're taking the right risks for the right reasons.
Okay, so I'm gonna bounce over to Ben here, and I'm gonna ask him a question. So Ben, you're officially building man. You've got such a great opportunity here to be able to build.
Don't screw this up, man. You got to do
No
this.
pressure.
It's a large organization inside the American Fire Service. What, 1,200? Is that right?
No,
Members?
no. We're right at 600.
600? Yeah. So 600, Ben, you say 600?
Yep.
Okay. So Ben, you've got
That's
a great
still a lot.
opportunity.
That's still a lot.
Quit interrupting me.
I'm just saying.
Just quit interrupting me, Eric. Ben, you've got a great opportunity in a large department in the United States, like 600 strong. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep. Give or take. As with everybody, our numbers are a little low right now, but yeah.
Okay. Well, so as you start to think about culture, I'm gonna throw this over to you. We've got about 10 more minutes, and then we'll end with Mike kind of giving us a final wrap up on his thoughts. But as you start to build a culture of safety and try to integrate that with not telling your people that, hey, we're not going to do our job, because that's what firefighters hear, that if we're going to be safe, we're not going to be our job, or excuse me, do our job. Tell me what your ideas are on how we build a safety culture that engages our young members and builds on the experience and knowledge.
Really shared this with anybody, so hope nobody from my department's watching. I'm just kidding. Actually, I hope they're all watching. But I will say this: I think that ultimately, what an HSO, right, who all of these things we've talked about and then that I talked about earlier fall kind of underneath my responsibility within the organization. I think what has to be felt and has to be known by the department is the reason why I do it. And the reason why I do it is just because I love people. I love my folks, right? And we have this thing in Cobb County where like we tell everybody we love them. And I said that to a buddy of mine one time who works for another department here in Metro Atlanta. And he goes, "Did you just tell me you love me?" And I was like, "Sorry, man, I forgot you don't work for Cobb." But the truth is, it's like we love one another. And I'm in this position because as Trevor said earlier, right, I have the ability to affect change. And it's the reason, it's my motivating factor. And it's not to lessen the job, to take the adrenaline rush and the thrill and the fun. And I don't want to lose any of that, because it's ultimately who made each one of us who we are. Right. That's what we all fell in love with the job for, was that, I mean, it's probably why we all signed up for the job in the first place. Right. It was because we love that aspect of the job. But when we look at and we start talking about the things like Mikey was talking about earlier with risk versus benefit and losing people that aren't actively searching for a victim inside of a structure, there's no excuse for that. You know, we didn't even talk about necessarily commercial structures in this. When we talk about, you know, a McDonald's, a Lowe's, a Home Depot, any of those things that they're literally just going to tear down, whether you've burned it to the ground or not, they're just going to tear it down and build another one right back in its spot, right? Nobody wants to die over that. I don't want to have to go to someone's family and go, well, I didn't really do my job, and therefore now we're playing bagpipes. Like that's not acceptable. And so to kind of wrap that up and bring it back to what you're asking,
it's not.
Is, you know, we have to, if you're trying to build a culture of safety, the boots on the ground have to know that you're doing it because you care about them. It's not.
So
that
you just hit it on the head,
company.
Ben.
Right.
Ben, you just hit it on the head, dude, because you're talking leadership, man, right? And that's my thing about leadership is the give a crap factor. None of us are doing any of this, man. I'm looking at all you guys like none of us are just doing this to do this. We're doing it because we care about firefighters out there, right? You care about your team in Cobb County. I care about freaking everybody now. Just like we got on this board, and Mike, you're in this, man.
You didn't used to care about everybody.
I do care about everybody. I'm looking right at you. I do care about you.
Come on now.
But isn't that like that's the passion we have, because the love that we have not only for the service, because like we love the service, but all of us have that passion to care about others, man. I don't want a brother or a sister to die on an incident when they didn't need to.
Right.
Well, and so I agree with that, Eric. And I still go back to the fact that as much safety as I have in my blood, and it runs deep, that the civilian in my mind comes first. And I know that might be counter to what a lot of safety people are saying in the fire service, but I believe it. I believe the civilian comes first. I don't believe the firefighter comes first.
Yeah.
I believe the civilian comes first. But we put educated and calculated into how we will rescue civilian lives. And that is where the firefighter comes first, in educated and calculated. And Mike, we've got about 4 or 5 minutes left, man. I'm going to give it to you. And I want you to tell us about educated and calculated. Like, how can the firefighter actually be first when they show up to a scene where there is a civilian life to rescue? You can't just, I'm guessing you can't just hope that you're going to be good in that instance, that you've become educated and calculated and that you are able to take those risks. Walk us through it.
Sure, and let me throw one thing out real quick to kind of bring this back, because this is, to me, this is critical, is there are 57 NIOSH line of duty death reports that cite something related to the incident safety officer. So once again, if anyone doubts that there's a need for an incident safety officer, there's 57 line of duty death reports. So 57 firefighters paid for their life because someone wasn't properly managing risk. So that goes back to, why was that? Was that because there wasn't one? That could be. We've said multiple times the ISO has to be a person. We've also talked about we all operate in different ways. To the point, someone has to own risk management. And we also just talked about redundancy. If you want to do the best thing you can do, because we're all educated and we're all going to calculate in different ways, the old saying is 2 heads are better than 1, and I'll argue 3 are better than 2. You know, we're going to have a lot better chance of success when we're using an incident management team rather than relying on an incident commander. So if we can put multiple people in that role of being educated and calculated, then we've got a better chance that what one person is missing, another person is going to catch. You know, if you want to talk about the Swiss cheese model for risk management, the more layers we can build, the better chance those holes aren't going to line up on every layer. So if we're each being educated and calculated as we can to the best of our ability, because we all bring something unique and different to the table, then we're going to have a much greater chance of success. And Eric has said it, and I believe this throughout my fire service career. Firefighting is the ultimate team sport. We're either all going to succeed or we're all going to fail together. And none of us wants to, at the end of the day, have to be that person that said, hey, I should have been the person getting the ball across the finish line, and I didn't for whatever reason. So that gets back to, we all have to personally own this, because, you know, the more gray hair, bald head, gray mustache you have, the more responsibility you have for those that are just coming in. And I hate to say it, but nowadays a lot of those younger folks are living and dying, quote unquote, based on social media. And we all know anyone can be an expert on social media. And I think it's up to us to try to temper and tame and filter that as best we can, to make sure that when we talk about education,
He threw his hand.
Ooh, man.
He threw his hands up in the
problem with the
air.
mic.
Put your hands up in the air. He's
Threw it that way.
yeah. You were raising the roof. You're raising the roof.
Well said, though, Mikey. Well
Yeah,
said.
go ahead and finish that out, Mike, and we'll that back.
That was
So
well said, though.
We'll edit that out, Mike. Yeah, very well.
Did you freeze again, Mikey? Oh, there you go. Go ahead.
Oh, he may have cut out a little bit.
We can hear you, Mike. Can you hear us?
Go ahead and talk.
Nope.
We can hear you.
Man, that's not good.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
So that's going to kind of bring us to the end of this. I appreciate everybody's perspective on educated and calculated and what we bring. Of course, this podcast, we continually are able to find safety things that we can talk about. I did mention a couple specific names in the fire service today. We talked about Justin McWilliams and the search culture. Certainly invite him to reach out to us. I would love to engage him in this. Not to be adversarial at all, but we engage a lot of folks. And then, of course, if Dr. David Griffin wanted to come on and have a conversation with us about safety officers and safety cultures, we would certainly invite that. If this podcast reaches either one of them, reach out to us. We would love to visit with you. I'm going to give everybody an opportunity here to sign off. In about 2 minutes, but don't be too long-winded here.
So,
Eric.
man, thank you. Great discussion. I think the next one we should have a conversation about is, we talked about the importance of the safety officer. We need to talk about how we integrate that into the scene and how that integrates into the command system and how they work together to be beneficial on the incident to make it successful. I think that's the key where we go. I'm going to give a plug for the conference really quick. We are all hazards, man. We're going to bring an all hazards approach to safety considerations and different incidents. We've got some great pre-cons that are coming. And so look for that to open up for registration at late August, early September timeframe. Back in Scottsdale.
Awesome. Trevor.
No, I think this has been a great discussion. I think it just, everybody we've talked about from all our different angles, from our different fire services, the importance of an ISO and how that culture that you need to develop, educate, and I think start it right from the bottom all the way to the top, up to the officers, up to the chief officers, and have that culture of safety, but be aggressive, and don't let safety, because there's people that think safety's in the way of aggression, and that shouldn't be the case. They should be hand in hand.
Ben Holly.
Fortune 500 companies hire people that spend tens of thousands of dollars to be risk managers in their organization, right? And they don't have lives on the line. We do in our line of work, right?
Yeah.
And so if a Fortune 500 company feels it's that important that they're going to spend their hard-earned dollars to have someone just manage risk for them, then why wouldn't we do it in the fire service where we're losing our brothers and sisters every day, right? There's got to be a way, and that way is you have to have a risk benefit system, and you got to implement it and you got to take it serious. And I think to Eric's point of what he said a little bit earlier in his wrap up is that if anybody has ever sat in a battalion buggy and tried to run an incident scene and understands how overwhelming that is, right? Why not? Why would you not have somebody there that's just going to focus on the safety aspect of it? Because we're not talking strategies and tactics, right? We can get into strategies and tactics. However, we are looking at the smoke, we're looking at the building, we're looking at the firefighters, right? That's what those safety officers are there for.
Correct. And Mike, we appreciate you being with us today, man. Thanks for taking your time out and your expertise, man. Do you have any last words? Closing
Sure,
words,
I
not
would.
last words. I don't like that. Closing
Yeah,
words.
no, we won't go there right
Wow.
now.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, famous last words maybe, but anyway, yeah, what I would say is ultimately those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And the fire service seems to have a problem that if we don't manage risk, we're going to continue to give up firefighters for nothing. And that's not something we can continue to do. So we have to acknowledge risk management. To add to Trevor, we need to be intellectually aggressive. There's a time and a place to go 110%, and there's a time to recognize we can't change this outcome. And the worst mistake you can make is try to get in the middle of an outcome you can't change. So we have to make sure that our professional development programs are what they need to be, and that's something we all struggle with. But I'll also a big proponent, you've heard me say it, R&D in the fire service in a lot of cases should not stand for research and development. It should stand for rip off and duplicate. We can all learn from each other, but we all want to reinvent the wheel. One culture that may work in one may not in another, but chances are if you're struggling with something, somebody out there can help you because they've been there. And that was one of the original reasons why I joined FDSOA, because the networking opportunities to learn from others who've been there and done that are phenomenal. And chances are somebody in this organization can help you with whatever you're struggling with so that you can try to ultimately, at the end of the day, and we all agree, take care of our people, because that's why we're all doing this. Because we owe it to the civilians to go out there, but as leaders in the fire service, we also owe it to our people to do everything we can to get them home at the end of the shift. Because I can assure you, none of us want to have to stand and face a family and explain to them why their husband, father, son, or whoever didn't make it back home when there was no reason for that. So that's what we're all here for, I hope.
All right. Well said, Mike. Well, for everybody here and for the FDSOA, thanks for tuning in to this edition of Street Talk. We hope that you enjoyed it. Share it with your friends. Take a look at our annual conference. As Chairman Valliere said, it's an all hazards conference. We love you. We thank you, and come back and see us next time. Thanks again.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.